Hey, it's Paul Baines with GreatDad.com, the website for fathers because dads don't always think like moms. And if you're just tuning in, Great Dad Talks is a series of weekly conversations with new and expert fathers, all with a point of view on modern parenting. As a life coach specializing in working with new and experienced dads, I'm always curious about modern dads and how we are evolving today. You can find more about my coaching and our other resources at GreatDad.com. And today I'm talking to Nate Turner. And I think it's going to be really a fun conversation. I just had a short chat with Nate after watching a bunch of his TED Talks and the other resources on his website. And he's not only does he have a lot of interesting things to say, but he's also very funny guy with a lot of good stories and a lot of good metaphors. And so welcome, Nate Turner.
Thank you for having me, Paul. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So the cool thing here is that you call yourself a humanity propulsion engineer, and I want to hear about what that means because I've never heard that term before.
Sure,
no, I mean, and also because you've got all these other things in your background, so you could have chosen any title: accounting, history, theology, and a lawyer, and you decided to be a humanity propulsion engineer.
Yes, sir. I don't want any of those other titles. It's a funny thing that you sometimes choose to do things that you later on realize that maybe that wasn't the best choice. But my son's an engineer. And so he would tease me, "You're not really an engineer." And I said, yeah, you can be an engineer if the goal is to help society, if you want to help society structure itself into something better. And so I feel like that is the call of all of us, that any of us who care about the greater good, we are all humanity propulsion engineers, because what's the point of us being here on the planet if we're not going to propel the humanity forward? So that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, and with all this training, it really comes through in everything you've talked about in the two books you've written. Is that your biggest mission in life has been raising your son, and then taking those lessons from raising him and wanting to bring those to other parents.
Yeah, he's the one who it gave me the instructions to do more. It was his words. We were in the garage, and I'm sure you know this. He left high school at 16 and moved to Brazil to play soccer. And I was sitting in the car with him, and he was like, "What's wrong with you?" And I'm like, "Man, I don't know what I'm gonna do with my life now. I've spent I've been your dad." And he was like, "Well, you're going to continue to be my dad." I said, "But you're leaving now." He said, "But man, there's something you still have time. You can do more." And I'm like, "Whoa, what more can I do?" He said, "Dad, all the stuff you've been doing for me, take it and share it with other families."
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah. So what I really want to talk about today is this idea that comes through, and we'll talk about the book and the genesis of the book, but is visualizing a life for your child and how to present that, visualizing your child's best life and transmitting those dreams and goals in a positive way that open up their point of view, open up their vista, open up their feeling of possibility. And how you came about this idea. And why don't we talk about
Sure.
like early days with your wife when you knew you're going to have a baby.
Okay.
And you must have already been thinking of, because you're this type of person, you were thinking already, I'm sure, the values you want to transmit, the aspirations. How did that come about? Just how?
Sure. So in 94, and my wife wakes me up in the middle of the morning and says, "It's plus, it's plus." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" So it's about 4:30, 5 o'clock. She's kind of a night creature. So it's not uncommon for her to be up walking around doing something. So I walk into the bathroom and I see this early pregnancy test on the counter. And I'm like, "Oh, right." Now I know what she's talking about, but I don't know what to say to her. Like, do I say congratulations? Do I say what the, right? So I go back and give her a hug, and we both recognize in that moment almost that given both of our childhoods, that we are like the misfit toys. We are completely unprepared to be a parent. And at the time I was a law student at Valparaiso University, and realized that, Valparaiso, while it is a good school, like it wasn't a great school. And she and I both wondered, well, what might have been different about our lives if we had been positioned to attend a great school? And that sort of was the genesis of what we decided to do. If we could just find a way to get our child to a better educational situation than either of us were. So we wrote Harvard and got an application from Harvard. and took the application from Harvard and sort of tore it apart into three things.
Before he was born.
Before he was born. This was in October of 94. And we look, and there's three things Harvard indicates. They want students who obviously do well academically, but secondarily, they wanted students who were world citizens. That was the word they were using in 94. And the third thing was that they wanted students who cared for something greater than themselves. And so I was in law school, but I was also working on my master's in history and theology. So that component of it, I felt I got that one covered. Like I sort of understand what they mean by something greater than yourself. But the world citizen part for us at the time, that just meant, well, we have to make sure our child can speak multiple languages. So like, okay, this child's got to meet some academic standards, speak multiple languages, and care for something greater than him or herself, because we didn't know what we were having at the time. And we decided that that was going to be the template we were going to use to govern our child's life, whatever we had throughout their life.
Wow. That's amazingly early in the process, where going from shock to like planning.
Start planning. Got the application, and when you read the application says, well, to go to Harvard, you have to meet these academic criteria. I'm from Gary, Indiana, so one of the worst school systems in the country. Like, well, how does one from Gary, Indiana, get to Harvard unless someone is doing some special things in the background to prepare? And so we thought, well, what does the literature say about early cognitive development for a child? And we just started reading stuff about what we could do. So the moment that we brought Naeem home, we were playing language tapes in his crib, and we were only speaking as an adult would speak to another adult, like you and I are talking. The first computer we owned was his computer. We bought a computer for him just before his first birthday. We teach people he was using the computer before we could get him to walk. Mm-hmm. So we just failed forward, because we didn't know what we were doing. Like, we were reading things, but we just kept trying to do stuff with the idea that if the sooner we could get him to read, the sooner we could get him to count and then start doing math, the sooner we could get him to learn other languages, the better chance we could meet the requirements that Harvard has set out.
Yeah. Wow. That's just, that's amazing. And so then the genesis of the book, you've written the book, which was published later, but it started out with these series of letters to him at a very early age, which turned into the book, Raising Supaman. And you call him Soup, right? As a
I call him Soup. I still call him that now.
The Supaman thing.
But
why did you start writing the letters? What was the start of that? Because I've written those letters, but it doesn't sound like I ever got to the discipline that you had with writing them like constantly. I've got like maybe 3 or something.
No, so I started writing things that I wanted to happen in his life. And out of it, a lot of it, I think, having a chance to process it, a lot of it is from my own pain and the sort of disconnect that I had with my own father, and wishing that there was something that I could have ever done that satisfied my father. Yeah. And so, you don't want to be the same kind of parent as the parent that you have. So I decided I would write letters. First, I would write affirmation, things that I wanted to happen. And then I would start to write letters for him. And as a 2-year-old, he says to me he wanted mail, and mail for him meant that he didn't care that mail was bad to me. Like, dude, there's nothing coming but bills.
Right. And
so we decided that we would, that I would start writing him little postcards and greeting cards to indicate, to share mail with him. And so in time, what I learned that he was learning to read from the letters that I was writing him. So I kept writing him. And then I decided to write him as an adult, as opposed to, let me move to another space, I apologize, as opposed to writing him as a child. Mm-hmm. And because I thought if I could write him as an adult, then I would essentially be preparing him one day when I wasn't around to still be able to have words for me that might have meant something.
Wow. Yeah. And what age did you, this was very early on, was it because you tell a cute story about taking him to the mailbox and him saying, like, where's the letter for me? But he was 2 or 3?
He was 2. He was 2. It had not turned 3. And I said, hey man, there's nothing good in this mailbox. And he was like, but Dad, I want mail.
Yeah.
I said, man, I just have bills, but Dad, I want mail.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. All right. So I started writing him on these little greeting cards. I went and bought greeting cards from Target and postcards, and I would write them, and then I'd mail them from the office. And several days later, I'd come home. He said, "Dad, I have mail," and I'd say, "Yes, I know. I'm the one who wrote the letter." He said, "Well, can you read it to me?" And I'm like, "Sure." And after doing that for a period of time, I said, "Hey, man, I'm not going to write you and read to you." And he says, "Well, cool. Teach me to read."
Mm. And you talked also about the fact that you never wanted to call him a little boy or a child. You always had we did this with our kids too, is we didn't ever talk down to them or dumb down the conversation, talking always to him like he was. But you have a problem with calling. You had a problem with calling him a boy or
a boy. Yeah, I had culturally, the word boy does not always have great connotations.
Yeah, that's true.
But beyond that, I thought it was interesting when I think about, for example, Old MacDonald. And when you think about Old MacDonald, you say Old MacDonald had a farm, and you mention what animals that Old MacDonald is raising. But we never talk about, if you say Old MacDonald's raising, we never say he's raising piglets, or that Old MacDonald, right? We always talk about Old MacDonald raising the thing that will be what it'll be as an adult. And I'm like, well, that's an interesting concept. But then why do human beings do that? Why do we say boy and girl when what we're really we're not raising boys and girls, we're really trying to raise men and women. So I was like, well, I'm just gonna call him my man in training, and I'm never gonna use the word boy, and I'm gonna ask everybody else to not use it, because at some point in time, when people expect him to be a man, how will he know when he's no longer a boy?
Yeah, but it seemed like it was also you're trying to I don't know, responsibilize or make sure that there isn't a period of time where you can just totally mess up, and then suddenly you're 18 and now you're expected to be a man,
right?
That's the real lesson in this.
Right. So it's like, hey, if that's where we're headed, then let's just be a man in training, like an engineer. No, you go to school and you're going to work on a degree in engineering. You're not an engineer yet, but you are an engineer in training. So we don't have another name for someone who wants to be an engineer, or a doctor or a lawyer, right? So I just thought we would start with the end in mind, and we would just work backward that way.
Yeah, the classic Stephen Covey end in mind kind of coaching
right.
process. I'm just really interested in that as a visualization. We talked about that a little bit before we went on about kids who might not react well to the high standards. And you had a great analogy, which it was similar to the way that I've always thought about it. I guess I use a different analogy. Is like you can open as many doors for your children as possible. It's up to them later on if they're going to walk through, but it's up to you as a parent to make sure they have those opportunities. But tell me your metaphor, because I think it's better than mine in terms of.
No, it's not better, just different. It's new, the buffet table, right? That I think of life, and the best lives are lives that are like the buffet table, where everything on the table, from the far left end of the table to the far right end of the table, available to you. Most people, such as those that grew up where I grew up, what was on the buffet table was stuff that was in a food desert. So it was mostly, potato chips and peanuts and maybe a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. But at the other end of the table, now that I'm older, when someone invites me to an event, there's caviar and there's filet mignon and there's Dom Perignon and there's all this wonderful stuff on the table. And I thought, but life is like that. And so why don't we just make everything available to people so that they can have a chance to sample and try and see for themselves what it is they want? And that's the way that we've tried to approach life, is certainly with our son.
Yeah. What other tips can you give for parents in the same situation about creating this visualization? I just think that right now there's just so much negativity, and there's so much pessimism, which you talked about with about Generation Z and how their expectations seem to be like getting smaller and smaller. How do you justify that same feeling where culture is just telling them, lower your expectations, and you and I both want to increase their expectations and hope?
Yeah. So one of the things I've asked parents to do is to stop outsourcing their parental responsibility to other people. And so I had a conversation just the other day with a funder for, I guess, a large educational philanthropic organization. And she and I were talking, and I said, I find it interesting. At no point in time, even today, have I ever had an educator ask me, what are my hopes and dreams for my child? And I said, and so that's a fundamental flaw, because the assumption is that parents don't have any hopes and dreams for their own children. So one of the things I would encourage every parent to do is just like write down all the things you hope and dream for your children. I mean, just make a long list and let it be audacious and bodacious as it possibly can be. Because what your children generally hope and dream for themselves, it originates in some way from you. And if you don't have any hopes and dreams, it's unlikely that your children will have any hopes and dreams either. Yeah.
Well, that's clearly something that comes out in coaching. If you're getting people to visualize that perfect life that they have, if they can't visualize it and can't smell it and taste it and see that it's a possibility within the life, there's no way they're ever going to magically get to that place. And we do the kids a disservice if we don't set those visions for them. But your optimism is just so infectious in your talks. Just the hope and optimism for your son, who's done great things in his short life, is really, really inspiring. So you've written Raising Supaman is that collection of letters, and you can go to Raising Supaman Supaman, right?
Yeah.
Okay. .com.
I didn't want to be sued. So we took the Ebonic version. Yes.
Yeah. And there you've got a coaching course too about helping parents create that vision. And then you also wrote another book, which I did not see, called Stop the Bus.
So I've written 4 books, and we're working on. Well, I'm actually working on 2 others, but yeah. So there was Raising Supaman. There was Stop the Bus. There is, I should say, It's a Jungle Out There, Powerful Parenting Lessons Inspired by the Lion King. And then there is the book my son and I wrote together called The Amazing World of STEM, which is our first attempt to write a children's book.
Oh, interesting.
Yep.
You're writing that with him.
We wrote that, and now we're working on the book 2 of that. And then I have a book I hope to get done. I shouldn't say I hope. I will get it done before the summer, called Journaling Forward. And it's an ideal I have of, rather than journaling like we typically do, which is about something that happened that we don't want to happen or didn't want to happen, I ask people to journal their best life as if it has already happened.
Wow.
So. Again,
back to the visualization.
Yeah.
And do you do personal coaching too, one-on-one coaching as well?
I don't. I mean, no, not professionally. I wouldn't say, but yes, there are people who call on me to ask for stuff, and I try my best to help. But I don't do it professionally.
Yeah, you do it. You do a lot of speaking, and of course the books. Well, it's really been a pleasure to talk with you. As we talked before, I was really inspired by the videos on the website, which it's NathanielTurner.com is the website where you can see your videos, and RaisingSupaman.com, where you can hear more about the book and that project. And
had I known, I would have shared my vision board with you, because there's my vision board.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I am attempting to live what it is I ask my child to live.
Yeah, visualization. Maybe it's just a really big and motivating way to look at if you can't see it, you can't do it, right?
Right. And I'm planning to live. Are you in California?
I'm in San Francisco. Yes.
So as you can see, my driver's license is a California driver's license.
Yeah.
So I'm visualizing the day that I get to live in California too.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Is there anything else you want to add about anything else that you're working on right now?
No, sir. That's it. That's it.
Okay. Well, it's been a pleasure to have Nate Turner with us today. I'm Paul Banis at GreatDad.com. If you're interested in our coaching services for new and older dads, you can find more at GreatDad.com/coaching. And until next week, have a great week. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul.